Hi, folks. Welcome to lunch in the D3 kitchen. I'm Anjana, developer advocate here at Observable, and I'm here with my colleague Ian. Ian, want to introduce yourself to folks?
Sure. Yeah, I'm Ian. I'm a data visualization developer at Observable, and I'm excited to do this with you today, Angela.
I am super excited to be doing this here with you because today we're going to be talking about D3. If folks turned into the stream last week, my colleague Visnu and I were looking at some data viz with Vega Lite. And as you may know from that stream, I do not really know what I'm doing with data viz, let alone with D3, which is a really interesting but also really giant and overwhelming and powerful library for data viz. So I'm really happy to be here with Ian, who knows a lot of the ins and outs, knows like tons of stuff about D3. Ian, maybe you could tell us a little bit like how did you start working with D3 when you started out?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, when I started, it was quite a while ago. D3 had actually recently come out, and I was working at a company that wanted to make some visualizations, and they asked me like, "Hey, can we figure out D3 looks like what we want?" And actually, it was at the time there was much fewer examples, a lot fewer, like there wasn't as many tutorials to learn from. So I joined the mailing list and spent about 6 months banging my head against certain learning curves and trying to meet other folks. But I've been, ever since I got over that initial hump, it's been really one of the best parts of the kind of work I do is to be able to make things with D3. So yeah, I'm excited to share what I understand and how I approach things and how I see other people uh, approach things, because I think another really cool thing about D3 is the community and just how open and sharing people are with their not only like the final product but also their process and how they work. And I think there's a lot of humility also because it's so hard to do all of the things needed to make a great data visualization that you usually have to work with other people.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, um, I'm excited.
Awesome, awesome. Well, super excited to jump in, but before we do that, it sounds like folks are having a little difficulty hearing or like the volume is maybe a little low. Is there any chance you could bump that for us a little bit?
How's this, everyone? I did not
Nice.
put my mic on. So,
That's much better. How's
uh,
that sound, everybody?
nice.
This
All
is what
right.
happens when you
Well,
do sound checks and then come back to it.
right.
Anywho, so now we're all here. We can all hear each other. It's fabulous. Hopefully, y'all folks at home maybe have some lunch to snack on, or depending on your time zone, breakfast or dinner or a midnight snack or an afternoon snack. Where is everybody coming in from today? Would love to hear in chat if you want to share where you're located. We're based in our headquarters in San Francisco, USA. And just a reminder, while we're all jumping on the chat, we are all following the Observable Code of Conduct. You can find it in our chat rules and in our About page, link there. So please, let's keep in mind this is like a safe, welcoming, inclusive environment. We're all here to just learn and grow as engineers and as data visualizers. So please, let's all be really respectful and kind to each other. Okay, so with that out of the way, ooh, we've got somebody having breakfast in New Zealand at the bright and shiny hour of 7 o'clock. Props! Thanks for showing up from New Zealand, Washed PG. And we've got folks on the other side of the UTC line over in Russia and Mumbai. So exciting to see folks from all over the place. Oh, I'm sorry, it's Hell on Earth is in New Zealand, and Wash PG is also here in the Bay Area. So we've got folks local to where our office is. We've got folks as far away as we can imagine, which is amazing. It's so great to see everybody coming together. And we'll be switching up the time zones that we do these streams to make sure that everybody can have a chance to join in. Okay. I'm making much ado about the stream stuff, but we're here to do some data viz. So what are we going to do today, Ian?
Well, I thought we could explore a nice data set that's been, I mean, it's originally, a research data set on penguins, but it's been prepared nicely by someone actually in the R stats community as a good, like, real data set that's also, simple and clear enough to explore for visualization purposes. And so I think, it's sort of like a solid ingredient for us to make something good out of that, everyone has access to. And then I thought we would, go through the process of making our own scatter plot from scratch. Because while you could use something like Vega Light, or there's many examples of scatter plots out there, I think what I'm hoping is that by the end of the hour, we can add in, like, sprinkle in some of D3's special spices, like transitions, to kind of show
special sauce on there.
Yeah, some special sauce, to kind of show, like, how you can make something from scratch and get to, like, a really exciting expressive capability using D3.
I am excited. So we're going to dive into this penguin data. I just dropped the link in the chat if you want to check out this data set, which you can explore in whatever you're using to explore data, whether it's R or Observable or something else entirely. We're going to be exploring it in Observable. Just really quickly, I think most folks tuning in today are already familiar with Observable, but what we've got here is an Observable notebook. We get to write JavaScript code in these little cells, and we're going to use the JavaScript library D3 to pull in this data and try to have a look at it. And if you haven't encountered Observable before, you can find links to learning all about how it works and what it is on our Twitch About page. So check that out if this is your first time in an Observable notebook. So okay, so we've got this data set. It's up on this GitHub IO site. How can we get it into our notebook here that we're both working in?
Yeah, so we can fetch, there's a CSV file hosted on GitHub.
Okay.
And we can fetch that into our notebook. And what I would probably suggest, this is how I often do things, is I'll require D3, and I'll bring D3 into my notebook first, which is a one-liner, right?
Okay, great. Is it just
exactly.
as simple as saying D3 equals require D3?
Absolutely, yeah.
Awesome. And now I get this D3 object with all these cool D3 methods. So I got a bunch of powerful stuff in my D3 section here, D3
Absolutely.
object here.
And one of those methods that we can take advantage of is the d3.csv, which is a utility for fetching and parsing a CSV file from a URL.
Awesome. And this is part of the D3 fetch sub-module, is that right?
That's right.
I feel like we used this in our stream last week too, for JSON instead, and CSV.
Yeah, and I think that's something worth pointing out too, is that D3 is a lot of things, right? I tend to think of it as like a toolbox even, right? Like there's many different tools, and depending on what you're doing, you can pull just a few out, or you may use, things from all over the toolbox. Or to keep with our kitchen metaphor, right? Like when you're trying to make something from scratch, you may need like some weird spatula that only in some situations, or a special cast iron pan or something, right? And like D3 is that. It's like a fully stocked kitchen that you can, you may not use all of it all the time, but if you'll find there's many situations when making data visualization where you're like, I need this thing, and lo and behold, D3 will have it there.
Gotcha. Yeah, well, as someone who does not cook ever in real life, I'm a terrible cook and do not do it. But I feel like this is sort of like walking into a friend's kitchen when the friend is like a huge foodie and has like all the fancy chef stuff like all in their kitchen. You can just like go in and grab a super fancy Japanese knife or something. I just don't know what I'm doing. So that's why you're here to walk me through this beautiful gourmet kitchen here. Okay, so we've got our D3 CSV method. Where can I grab the URL to this data? I'm guessing it's on here.
Well, so I actually went ahead and I made an observable notebook for this data, primarily because this, the one that you just had up, for the R data package, is really well designed, but for R, so that you can just sort of one line import the data set in an R environment. So I wanted to do the same thing for us, So if you look at the Palmer Penguins notebook that I put in the links there.
I think that's this one, yeah?
Yes.
Look at these adorable penguins. I'm so excited to plot them.
So yeah, Allison Horst, who put together the R one, she drew those as well. And
very cool, very cute
amazing
artwork. Okay, so you've actually done this where I can now import this penguins data set from your notebook. So now we're taking advantage of like observable notebooks all being these little ES modules that we can import from. But just to understand how you did that, I'm looking down here at this penguin cell, and I'm seeing that you did exactly as you said. We're using this D3 CSV. You got the CSV file, which is hosted on that on GitHub, and then passing in D3 autotype, which I'm guessing converts like all of the data in that CSV into whatever type it thinks is the best for that data. Like it'll take a number and convert it to integers or floats rather, numbers.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's a little handy utility function that, you do want to be careful arbitrarily using, but for cases where a CSV is like pretty well structured, it's handy.
Great. And since this one is sort of intended to be a kind of an easy to use, beginnery kind of data set, which is perfect for me, that should probably work fine. Okay, cool. So now I just copied this line, import penguins from nglat/Palmer penguins. So now I get this penguins sort of as if it was a cell in my own notebook, thanks to Observable's importing across notebooks. And so now I can check out this data in my own notebook. Very cool. Okay, so what are we looking at here? Looks like we've got an array. We've got 344 rows in our data, and each one has the species, the island that it's from, some specs on its various body part sizes and weight, and then its sex and the year I'm guessing this observation was made.
That is right. Yeah.
Cool beans.
Yeah, this is sort of like a nice thing because there's several of these numeric properties, right? Like the length of the bill or the flipper or the weight that we may want, like we could compare two of those and see if any patterns jump out across the species. And so I think that's like a very, as a common kind of thing you want to do, especially anytime you first get any data set. And it's also something that lets us sort of, build something out with D3 that I think will be interesting because a lot of times you don't just want to look at two dimensions, you want to switch between them and kind of get a sense for, penguins that you're interested in, or if some of them jump out, you want to follow them as you look at them from different angles. So I think by the end of the stream today, we should be able to do that.
Cool. Okay, so how would we go about doing that?
Well, yeah. So often the way that I think about getting started with something like this is that we have 344 rows, right? So another way to think about it is we have 344 penguins. And I would like to draw just a circle for every penguin on the screen, right?
So a point for every data point in our data set.
Yeah. Okay. And oftentimes I see, this used to happen to me more, and it still can if I don't catch myself, is that you want to start by saying like, oh, I want to do all this fancy stuff and see it in just exactly this way. But if you try to go too far without just getting something up on the screen, it can be easy to end up in this state where like nothing's on the screen and you're wondering why.
Definitely.
I think.
Yeah.
That
sounds great. Okay, so how with D3, how do I like draw something on my screen?
Well, there's a couple ways you could, and I think that, I'm going to suggest that we start with one of those ways, which is using SVG.
Okay.
Scalable vector graphics, which is it's a native browser API for drawing with DOM elements.
Gotcha. So if I wanted to read up on SVG, I would probably go to MDN, for example. Oh, I typed the wrong thing, but I'd probably go to MDN and look up SVGs and learn all about that. And of course it's not working because I typed the wrong thing. But if I wanted to, what is going on here? If I wanted to read up about scalable vector graphics and all of the API stuff around that, I think I have a ton of documentation up here on MDN. Okay, so how are we going to use SVGs in this little observable notebook here?
Yeah, so SVG is basically HTML, right? So any way that you would write HTML, like having divs and writing out paragraphs, is exactly how you would write SVG, and you just need to put it inside an SVG tag or element, right?
Okay. So Observable has this built-in HTML tag that I can put in front of a template literal. So could I use that to do like SVG blah, 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 blah?
Yeah. And really, if you just open and close the SVG tag, you should see something come up.
I see some space taken on the screen. I think there's even also an SVG tag here. Looks like it gives me pretty much the same thing, but just in case we might end up wrapping it in a div or something, I'm just going to use plain old HTML.
Yeah, and I think the first thing I'll point out is that usually you give the SVG a width and a height.
Okay. Should I use the like width of the, so Observable always gives me this width variable, which tells me the width of a cell based on how I'm viewing it, what's going on in my browser, my viewport and whatnot. Can I use that?
Yeah.
Like this. So I'm just using this, since this is a JavaScript template literal in between these backticks here, I'm just using my curly dollar curly's syntax to insert a value from another JavaScript variable, in this case, with this like a built-in in Observable that I can use. So let's try that. And then for height, should we set like a height variable maybe?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna do this, and it's gonna complain that I haven't defined height. Yes. Okay. Let's define it. What do you think? Like, I don't know, 500?
Yeah, 500 seems
we can
reasonable.
Adjust. Okay, so now I've got a bunch of space.
Yeah. Right. So we have basically a canvas that we can draw on, which I do want to briefly mention that the alternative that's commonly used to drawing in the browser SVG would be Canvas, which has a different kind of API and a different kind of trade-offs for drawing. Like you can draw more things quicker with it, but it's less convenient for like doing interaction and that kind of thing. So,
gotcha.
Oftentimes people sort of think D3 and SVG are sort of part of the same thing, but I like to emphasize that D3 is a set of tools that will make it easier to do certain things in SVG or Canvas. But you could always drop down like we did. We just wrote out some SVG here.
Okay, so it seems like, and in keeping with our gourmet kitchen metaphor, it seems like there's kind of a million ways to do a lot of things. And so maybe, like, at least for me, that's a little bit overwhelming when I'm starting out. So it's helpful for me to have kind of like just one way that I can learn to do things. And then later, if it ends up that I need other ways, like I need to use a canvas for something, I can look into that later. But I'm perfectly comfortable pretending that this is how you do it for now, even if there's a million other possibilities.
Absolutely. And yeah,
Great.
I think, there's good reason to start with SVG too. Like we can do a lot pretty quickly.
Excellent.
As I hope we'll see shortly here. So yeah, I mean, speaking of that, right, like we want to draw, eventually 344 circles, and we want to, give them different colors and move them around on the canvas according to their measurements, right? So
sorry, just to pause there. So Hell on Earth, this points out that if we want this to be a square box, this SVG, we could also make height just equal to the width, and then we have the equal dimensions. Do you think that'll end up being useful to have like a more equal proportions here? Should we do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we could try either way. One of the nice things actually is that we'll see in the course of doing this is that we could change the height and our graphic would adapt appropriately.
Okay.
So
for now, just because that makes it really big for this, let me put it back to our shorter
Yeah.
500 so we can fit the whole thing on our screen here. Okay. But anyway, we
Yeah.
can see later how whether or not, as Ian claims, it is easy to update the height and everything will just magically reposition itself. We'll find out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Dun, dun, dun. Okay, so how do I start drawing these penguin circles?
Right. Well, what I'm going to suggest we do is just draw a single circle and write it out by hand, not using any D3, just so we get a sense of like what drawing is like in the browser. And then when we bring D3 in, which is going to sort of automate the drawing for us in particular ways, that we'll kind of have a better idea of how it's helping us. And so in SVG, you have a circle tag, which just like a paragraph tag or a div is something that you can write out, and you can give it has special attributes that control things like where it's positioned on the screen and how big the circle's radius is. So for radius, you would say R is, let's say like 50 or something, right?
Okay.
And if you run this, we should see a circle,
a quarter of a circle anyway, a little pie.
In the top left. Yeah.
Pie shape. Pie as in food. Guess I'm just hungry.
Right. One of the things is that in SVG, the y-axis is sort of upside down from how you would think about things in math or like normal charting. A lot of graphics is like this. So it's actually 0 starts at the top, and then as you get bigger, it goes down. So let's move our circle.
So this is 0, 0 in this top left corner.
Yes. If we say, so we can get the properties CX and CY to give it, to move the center of the circle. So let's say, I don't know, I usually do like 100 and 100 or something, right? Just like move it a little bit.
Just like this? Oh, there we go. Okay. So now, so this is 0, 0 in this top corner, and now we're at 100, 100 is like the center of the circle now. Cool.
Right. Yeah. And so, I mean, that's essentially, I guess the last thing I want to point out is that you can have a fill attribute, which we can use to set the color. And just like CSS colors, we can do, hex like, or RGB or anything like that.
I do like
or just
blue.
Names. Yeah.
Cool. Great. What color should we do? Any color preferences? I like green.
Or sea green. I like the weird CSS. Ooh, Alice Blue from Visnu.
Alice Blue. Ooh, very pale. Ooh, it looks icy like penguins. It's a little hard to see. Can I do a border or an outline on this too?
Oh yeah, you can. It's stroke is the property for an outline.
Stroke. So I could do like stroke black or something.
Like a color, yeah.
Cool. Awesome.
Yeah. So with that, we basically have wow, there's
Fire
some crazy
brick. What's
colors
that one?
in the chat.
I was at a conference on Friday, and Papaya Whip was universally chosen as the most fun CSS color. I like Fire brick though. Papaya Whip. Okay, we could spend all day playing with colors.
Yeah.
But you said your favorite is sea green. Should we go with that for now?
I've been going with that for a little bit. So,
nice.
Yeah. So basically, this is all the kind of raw ingredients we need to make the scatter plot, and we can start bringing D3 into the equation to figure it out. So
great.
Yeah, I mean, the basic thing we're going to want to do, and I think I'll recommend that we do this in another cell. We'll make a render function.
Okay.
And this is how I sometimes structure things, because it's very similar to how you might do things in like React or some other like Vue, some framework, or even like standalone HTML and JavaScript. Basically, we're going to say we want to use D3 to draw some things on an SVG element. So we're passing.
So that means we want to pass in an SVG. Okay.
Yeah. And we'll use, the first thing we'll do is we'll select that element with D3 select.
Okay. D3 select SVG.
Yes.
Like that?
And we'll want to store that as a variable.
Okay, so what does D3 select return? Is that going to be like?
It returns what D3 calls a selection, which is essentially a reference to like one or more DOM nodes. And
Okay.
from a selection, you can sort of, it has all these handy things. This is kind of like for anybody who used jQuery back in the day, where you could like, select a div and you could like set the attributes or the styles quickly. It's a lot like that, but with this one extra feature that we'll use, which makes it really easy to do a bunch of drawing with a few lines of codes for a data set, like our Penguin data set.
Okay, so I'm just going to capture this SVG here in a variable, or I'm going to call this cell my SVG, if that sounds okay.
Yep.
And just so that I understand what this selection is, what I'm doing here is I'm just like getting it and then just going to return it real quick just to understand what's happening here. I just want to see what this looks like. So if I call render on my SVG now, I get some weird object with groups and parents. And okay, so I guess this is a D3. This is like what D3 thinks in.
Yes. Yeah.
Sort of. Okay. Okay.
And so you often don't need to look at the selection object itself. You're usually more concerned with the DOM elements that are being created or modified. And so you use like typical browser debugging tools like the element inspector or the console.
Okay.
So let's do our first thing with that.
Huzzah! Let us.
We want to make a bunch of circles, right? So we'll take our selection and we'll use a method called .selectAll, and we'll pass it a string circle. And so what that's going to do is grab all the circles in the SVG, and then we can do stuff with those circles. But the trippy thing is that we want to do things to circles that don't exist yet.
So we want to add circles. Okay.
What we're going to do is we're going to chain onto that select all thing. We're going to say .data, and we're going to pass in our array of penguins, which I believe is called penguins, right?
Like this. So we've got selection .select all circle, or whatever element we were wanting to work with, in this case circles, and then .data penguins. Okay.
That's right. And so then we can use a new feature, a relatively new feature at D3 called .join, which we can also say is circle, pass the string circle to. And what this is going to do is, if you imagine that like you had to you wanted to say, okay, I have 344 penguin data points. So that means I want 344 circles. But there's only, right now, actually, we have one circle on the canvas. So for that one circle, I want to say, give it one of my data points. And then I want to create 343 new circles, right? Like you can imagine if you did that in a for loop and you had to keep track of which ones are new and which ones aren't new and adding them, and right, like you could get.
So like, let's say then I wanted to filter that data or something, and then I would have to like go through and make sure I'm only.
Yeah.
Okay. So this join like creates kind of like this happy partnership between the circle element and the data set that I'm giving it.
Right.
The data array.
Right. So basically the first thing we'll want to do is that anything we do after this join is going to be done to all the circles that we want. So it's going to make 344 circles if they don't exist yet. But they don't have any properties. So we need to set the radius and the X and Y.
Okay, and we do that with more chaining? I feel like there's a lot of chaining in D3. I should get comfortable with this chaining, all of these.
I think so.
Enter dot. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Learning to cook, learning to hold my knife. Basic knife skills. We can talk about knife safety, kitchen safety later.
Right.
Okay, so I need to set things like the radius and whatnot. Is that the idea? Oops, I didn't finish it, so everything's broken, but whatever. But so the idea is that I need to like add, you said I need to set the kind of features, or I guess they're called attributes of the circle.
Yes.
Cool.
So let's I see a good question in the chat that I want to answer about the difference between D3 data and datum, but let's
Great.
real quick first get something on the screen, and then I
Yeah.
think we can talk a little bit about that.
Sounds good.
So you want
Come back to that question. Yeah.
the attribute setter, which is .attr.
Okay, so this is like
attribute.
set attribute.
Yes, and then you want to, the first argument is a string of the attribute that you want to set. So let's say R is, for radius, and for now we can hard code it, which means that all of the circles will get the same radius.
Should we do something maybe a little smaller, like 15 or something?
Yeah.
Okay. So now
And
if I...
Mm-hmm. Yeah, go ahead and...
should I run this?
Yeah.
Okay, so it updated the function, and then it ran this cell automatically because it's observable. And now I have a circle up here and a circle here. Yeah. But I wonder if this is actually like 300 circles or whatever, 300 and...
Yes, so that is what happened, is basically the circle that's already there, we changed this radius to be smaller, right? Because it used to be 50 and now it's 15. But all the rest of the circles just got created without an X and Y, so they start at 0, 0, kind of like...
So they're, okay, so this is the one with 343 circles layered on top of each other or something. So I'm just like staring into the abyss of all of these circles. Yeah. Is that right? Okay.
Exactly. So what we can do, for instance, is we can let's set the X position by doing .attr cx. Okay. And we can actually pass a function to this instead of a single number, where if we do like a lambda function, I think it's called, right?
Like an arrow function? Yeah. Love these. Love lambda functions, anonymous functions. Yes. So anonymous cool. Love them.
Great. So yeah, basically what this is doing is it's going to give us the data point associated for each circle, and then we can tell it what we want the X coordinate to be based on that data point.
Okay, so I've seen, like, I'm using D here for like data point. I guess it could be whatever I want. It could be P for penguin or whatever. I'm just going to use D. And then we want for the positioning, what value should we use? Should we just use...
Well, I mean, one thing we could just do naively, and I often do this, is just take one of the parameters like bill length and just return that, because it's totally not like...
Is it like that?
Gonna work perfect, but we should see something. Yeah.
Is that how it's spelled? Bill length millimeters. Like that? And I see what happened. Oh! Okay, so they started...
Yeah. So they're spread out a little bit, but not quite enough. The other thing I do sometimes, if I don't have a number, because it's in millimeters, right? And we're telling SVG, hey, like put them at these pixels, and that it just doesn't map to something that makes sense to us, which is probably the next thing we'll get to with D3 scales. But before we do that, I think one other thing I like to do is that there's a second argument to your anonymous function you can give, which is the index.
Okay.
So if you do D, like, I.
Like that?
Yes. So the other thing you could do is just pass in I as, and that's basically for every data point, so spread them out. Yeah.
Okay, so now it looks like it's just drawing a, could I change the, like, maybe the opacity to see if this...
Yeah, that'd be a great thing to do.
I'm going to set...
You could set it as a style instead of an attribute as well.
Okay, so is that dot style? Yeah. Opacity, I don't know, should we do something really low, like 0.2 or something?
Yeah, let's do that.
Maybe then I can see, it didn't really help.
We can also...
There's so many of them.
We can lower the radius a little bit from 15 to like 5 in a minute.
Well, it's just... Okay, all right, but I get the sense it's drawing these like, okay.
It's spreading them out. So
it's spreading them out.
Yeah, we'll make them...
The X anyway.
Yeah, this is like a common thing where it's like something showing up and it kind of makes sense, and then we're going to keep pushing it to make it make more sense.
So if I do this, then I get like a diagonal line. Okay, cool. So I can do it with the Y as well as with the X.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay, so we've drawn something. So maybe this is a good time to take a minute and check on questions from the chat.
Yeah, so the question that I was mentioning earlier about the difference between data and datum, so actually someone answered it correctly already, Tessellation Joe, that data is plural. So it takes an array, whereas datum is singular, and you can basically, you can think of the dot data API function as binding data to the DOM elements. So it's what lets you say, okay, I have these circles, I want them each to have a particular penguin's data.
Mm-hmm.
You can find yourself in cases where you want to change what data is associated with a given element, especially in more complex visualizations where maybe you have like sub elements in your thing, right? Like you're drawing multiple things per level or something like that. And so then you might want to say like, okay, when the user clicks on this circle, switch out the data to be this other stuff and do this other fancy thing. So yeah, basically that's the gist there.
Gotcha. Well, if anybody has any other questions, it's also a great time. And yes, we noted that we can choose D or P. They're just upside down of each other.
Yeah. And oh yeah, and then Visnu points out that datum doesn't do the joiny stuff. So if you want to have it D3 create a bunch of stuff for you or update, you want to use data, not the singular one.
Gotcha.
So
Okay.
does the data. Yeah.
We have another question from WashPG. When to use attribute, ATTR attribute versus style, like we did here for opacity?
Yeah, that's a good question because basically when you use style, you're setting the equivalent of CSS things, right? So if you were to set up a style tag in your HTML and like give classes and use cascading style sheets that way you would for
kind
HTML.
of like doing this, like something. If I wanted to edit the style tag here,
right,
it would be analogous to doing that.
Exactly. So D3 will, if you basically set multiple styles, D3 will make that for you on the element.
Gotcha.
And the reason that that's nice is that it plays nicer with CSS. So if you use the attributes, like SVG supports sort of these attributes that are visual in nature, like the stroke and the fill.
Mm-hmm.
But then the rules for the CSS cascading are different. So I basically always try to do anything that I might want to do as a CSS thing as style is the heuristic I use.
Gotcha. Okay. And then attribute for the things that are kind of like these like sort of innate attributes for the whatever element type it is. Like circles have this CXCYR kind of thing.
Exactly.
Okay, cool.
Exactly.
That's very helpful. Great question. Thank you.
Yeah.
So can we maybe draw things in a less confusing place?
Absolutely. So I think this is a great time to introduce D3 scale.
Okay.
I can actually drop a link to the docs in the chat real quick. And this is a utility that actually doesn't touch the DOM. You could use it anywhere to calculate. Basically what it's going to help us do is say, okay, we have our penguin bill lengths, right, which go from some number of millimeters to some other number of millimeters.
Okay.
And we want to draw them, we want to space them out in our screen space, which is pixels of like 0 to 900 pixels or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you could do the math to like calculate the ratios and do that. But basically D3 has packaged all that up in many of the common ways that people do this in DataViz.
Gotcha. So this is like,
mm-hmm.
if I may, so like this is, so right now I just changed this back to what we had originally, which was that for the CX, so for the X coordinate, we're using, and now I'm just ignoring the index, we're using the bill length millimeter property. And as we can see, this is only extending like a little bit of the screen because the millimeters are like generally small values, I guess, like maybe, I don't know, it looks like up to 100 or something. Or less than that. Anyway, and so what I want to do is like take this space of like where these values kind of fall and stretch it out over the width of my SVG.
That's
kind
right.
of? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Just
And
trying to make sure I understand what we're doing here.
Absolutely. The other thing you could probably do is set the y coordinate to be a different thing, like the bill. What's the other one?
Bill depth?
Yeah. Because then, I mean, what we see is basically an unreadable scatter plot, and by using the scales, we'll be able to quickly make a readable one.
Great. Okay, so how do I use this scale thingamabob?
Yeah, so I would set it up so right above where you create all the circles. We can
Like
create,
up here?
yeah. You know, oftentimes because we're trying to set an X and a Y scale, people just call them X and Y. So let's start with X. So we just want a variable X that is, and is a d3.scale linear is the first scale I'll point out.
Okay.
It's a good place to start almost all the time. And yeah, so you want to call it like a function like that. And then you're going to actually configure it by chaining again. So there's two important things, and you may remember this from, I don't know, like high school algebra, but the domain and the range.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And we can, so the domain is basically saying, what are the smallest and biggest numbers in our data? So we're going to pass it in an array.
So if it's like just eyeballing it, if let's say it's within 0 to 100, I could do, it's an array.
Yeah.
I could do something like this.
Exactly. So we'll there's another utility that will help us figure this out quickly. But for now, let's just do what you did, hard code it.
Okay.
And so that's the input, the data. And then the output that we want it to go is the range, which is basically from 0 to the width of our chart.
Gotcha. So like this?
Yes. So
Boom.
now this gives you a function X, which if you pass the bill length into,
the bill length in here?
Yes, in the CX thing.
So X is a function?
Yeah.
So I call it
X
on the bill length?
Mm-hmm. So what that's saying is basically, hey, for this penguin's bill length, what is the corresponding pixel value?
Okay, so it seems like I overshot here because these values are like well within this 0 to 100 range, but they're even smaller range than that. Or sorry, domain. Even a smaller domain than that. I'll get my terminology right. So how can I do I have to look at the data and figure out like the min and max of the bill length, or how can I do this?
You could, but there's a utility called d3.extent, which will do it for you.
Okay. Do I use that inside here?
Yeah, basically it's going to return an array. And I might put it on its own line, like call it x extent or something, because it, otherwise we're going to get a lot of code in one line. But you basically pass it, the first argument would be penguins, the data. And the second argument is another anonymous function that, we pass in D and we return the value that we want to get the extent of. So the bill length, probably, for X, right?
Oh, I spelled this wrong. Extent. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's X extent. So, and then that's like an array. I could look at that.
That's exactly what I was going to say. We could have another cell where we check it out real quick.
Oh, no, I can't because it's internal to this code block. So I don't get it. I can return it real quick. This is hacky.
Yeah.
This is hacky, but just to check it out.
Yeah, that or just
no, then that's going to be the value of. Sorry?
You could just copy that line
this. Yeah,
of
okay,
code
fine.
and,
Okie doke. Scoping and observable. Okay, so this is an array that goes from 32.1 to 59.6. Aha, okay.
Right.
So now I can use this in here. I don't need this cell anymore. So now, if I did this right, I ran this, it automatically updated, and now it drew everything in kind of the right, like as spread out as possible. And we can even start to see that these are separate circles now. Look at that. Isn't that nice?
Yeah, nice.
Cool.
Yeah. So we could quickly do the y-axis as well.
Yeah,
basically using the exact same principles. And
I'm just going to copy paste this because time is marching on. But I think we
Indeed.
can build something cool in the next 15 minutes. We're making a lot of headway here.
I mean, that's
Okay,
another fun thing is that once you get like going, you can see some rapid progress with D3.
Great.
It's often
Okay.
that you get tripped up on like little things on the way.
Yeah,
So.
well, and we're just learning. We should be patient with ourselves. Well, I'm just learning. Build depth is what we wanted on the y-axis, right?
Yes.
Cool. Okay. Oh, I forgot to do something, didn't I? This didn't work.
You need to call y.
When I'm positioning it, I have to call y on the values. Oh, look at this now. I've got a little kind of a scatter plot. I think I messed something up, though. A lot of these are cut off.
I think you might have made the range still be width for the y-axis when we want it to be the height.
Good call. Thanks. Good catch. So now if I do that, did it fix it? Kind of. This last one is cut off. Is that because it's the one that's at the maximum, like this one and this one?
Exactly. So one common thing people do is use a margin, which the scale makes really easy to do. We can basically say that instead of going all the way to width and height, we can just subtract some number of pixels that we want to, say basically go almost to the width.
Okay, so maybe if the radius of the circles is 15, maybe if we like subtract twice that,
yeah,
we should fit everything. Is that? I don't know if that math is right, but let's try that.
Yeah. So that will push it, and then you also get on the left side, and the top, you get things that are cut off because they're the low end. So you could do the same thing for instead of putting 0, you could put 30 there.
Good call. Okay, we still have some that are at this 0, 0. I wonder if this had to do, I remember Visnu pointed out a while ago that there are some sneaky like NA values in this data, which we can see right here. Like this one doesn't have anything.
Exactly.
Should we maybe, is there a way to filter that?
Definitely. I think it's part of what makes this a good data set is because that's like a realistic case, right? Is that data isn't always perfect. But for the purpose of what we're trying to do, I think, one thing we could do is just use like JavaScript's filter on our penguins somewhere.
Like when I pass it into data?
Yeah. And basically say, as long as the build length is not NA, then we want to keep that element.
Does that work? Oop.
I think you need one more parentheses, closing parentheses.
Oh yeah, good call. Always the parens. Okay, that got rid of those. Nice. Okay, cool. Okay, that's, we maybe want to do some more data cleaning and whatnot, maybe even before we pass in the array, but it seems like this is a quick and dirty. This will work for now.
Yeah.
Cool.
And so I mean, now we have, technically a scatter plot, but there's a lot of things that can make it, a lot nicer. We can add color, axes, right, is a common thing. So you can actually see what's being plotted here.
Yeah, could we maybe like color the circles differently, maybe based on like the species or the island or something?
I think, let's try the species first, because I think one of the nice things is that the data set should separate a bit. Like there's like sort of clusters based on species.
Okay, so this is this was the fill or the stroke that we want to change?
Yeah.
So is that an attr or a style?
I'd say style.
Style. 50-50 chance there. Okay, so style fill.
That's right.
And then how am I going to choose the color here? I guess I need to like set up some color values. Yeah,
so there's a couple of things we could do. And one of the easiest will be to use another scale. And
another scale?
Yeah. There's a thing called D3 Scale Ordinal. And I believe,
let me just so this doesn't error out, I'm just going to change everything to green right now. Okay, cool. So I could make like a color scale.
Yes. And so Scale Ordinal you can basically pass into it a color scheme, which D3 has some built-in ones. And you should be able to see with the autocomplete if you do d3.scheme.
Scheme. Ooh.
And then
Let's see. Blues, greens, grays, pastel.
Actually, the category.
Purple, blue, green. Is that what that means?
That is what that means. Yeah.
That sounds good. We need 3 colors.
Yeah. As you can see, there's a lot of color schemes, and the documentation on, or I put a link, if you search colors on Observable too, like colors is like its whole domain of science and design that you can go as deep as you want. But
gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, so for now, so how do I use this? Is it a function or a method or
it is just
property?
like an array of hex values. So yeah, you just pass it in like that.
Like this?
Yeah. And now basically you can just call color scale on the species in your fill function.
Oh, so I have to put this in an anonymous function, I'm guessing?
Yes, yes.
So for each D, I want to do color scale on the D species. Huh?
That's right. And what did we, oh, I think we might, so let's try, instead of scheme PUBGN, can you try category 10?
Category, no, scheme, category 10?
Yeah. See if that makes a difference.
There we go. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So I just have to learn about what these different schemes are. This is nice. Okay, so we've got some blue ones. I don't know which one is which though. But we can figure that out later.
Yeah, we could pretty quickly make a legend.
That seems useful.
Yeah. Well, I guess there's a couple ways to do that. So there's a legend that we could work on. We could make the axes as well.
Let's try that. Why don't we, if we draw the axes, and then we can try drawing the legend if that works, and then we'll have a scatter plot.
Yeah.
I mean, we already have a scatter plot, but now we have a kind of mystery scatter plot. We don't know what these dots are or where they fall. So if we could draw some axes, that would help. How do we do that?
Certainly. So, one of the things that D3 has in the toolbox is an axes component. You can think of it more as like a UI component that will essentially render, create SVG, for your scale. So it takes in our X or Y scale as an option, and then paints onto the SVG for us. So there's yeah, so you could basically say x-axis equals D3, and there's a few different ones. Let's say axis bottom is the, if we want to put the x-axis at the bottom of the chart, we pass in the x function.
That's it?
And that's it, but we're gonna need a place to render that. And so I want to introduce the group element in SVG, which is the G tag, which is very similar conceptually to a paragraph tag.
Back in my SVG. Okay. G group.
Yeah. And you can maybe give it an ID like x-axis or something, because we're going to want to select it and then tell the axis hey, that's where we want you to render your axis into.
Okay, so that's going to be, so earlier we did D3 select on the SVG, and then we did selection, select all circle. So does that mean we do select all group, or?
You can just select a single one. So you can do selection.select, and you can pass in a regular, CSS selector. So you can do the hashtag x-axis as your selector.
Like this?
Right. And you can then use D3's .call on that and pass in the x-axis.
Call x-axis on the x-axis ID'd element?
That's right.
That's what it's doing? And this x-axis is some mystery magical function. I just want to see what this looks like. I'm guessing it's going to be another weird D3 object that oops. I guess I can't do this. Well, what happens if it's just a function? Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
just
you can
learning.
think of it like most UI components where it's kind of just, you call something, it's going to generate a bunch of stuff for you based on what you pass in.
Okay, so I run that and nothing happened.
Well, this is probably a good idea, or a good time to inspect the DOM. We want to make sure that we've got the G element and
okay,
that it's present.
Can folks see my, oh, this didn't let me inspect something in here. Can folks see my dev tools here? I don't know if folks can read this.
See.
Maybe a little small.
Okay.
Let me try to make that a little bigger. Move this down. Okay, so I see circle, 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 circle,
Right,
circle,
so
circle, 300 circles. And in this SVG, do I see a group
it's
at the
hiding.
end of this?
It's hiding some nodes, so you have to click that button, I think.
Can I do something hacky and just move this first? Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing I sometimes do is, since I'm not worried about the circles, I might even just not render the circles for a second. And
oh, okay. Well, oh, here it is. Okay, now it's first, so I can find it. Okay. So it's there. It's just... oh, wait, why is it there now? Just because I moved it up?
You know what it is? Okay, it's partly because we didn't re-evaluate the my SVG cell with the new tag. So there's nothing for it to grab onto.
Oh, I see. Okay, but now I reran it, and so now if I put it back after the circles, it went away again. Is this like a positioning thing?
Oh, I think no. I think you have to also render. Oh, interesting. You run it like that.
Well, this should run automatically as soon as my SVG changes, because Observable, once Observable sees that my SVG has changed, it's going to run any cell referencing my SVG. So it's going to run this render cell, right?
Yeah, I see what happened though. It's the circle tag isn't closed. So it's putting the axis in the circle. And SVG doesn't like you putting stuff inside, like it's drawing elements like circles and rectangles.
See. So now it shows up even if it's afterwards. Okay, so user error.
But it's good to know.
DevTools. Good to know. I have to close my tags.
And the order does matter in that things put earlier, like things render on top of each other. So for instance, right now, the axis, if it was covering, would cover the circles rather than the circles covering the axis, if that makes sense.
I see. Okay, because it's drawn first. But in this case, they don't happen to overlap. But okay, good to know. All right, so we've got the x-axis. Maybe we'd want to move it around, but just in the interest of time, because we're right up on an hour now. I don't know how much time you have, Ian, but maybe we can just real quick do the y-axis, which I'm guessing is going to be real similar.
Mm-hmm.
So let me just copy all this. And boop. Okay, well, not very pretty, but yeah. So now this is y-axis, axis. Do we still want it to be axis bottom, or maybe we want axis?
Left, probably, right? If you want to have it.
Left, okay.
There's left and right, depending on where you want to put it. Mm-hmm.
And then this is going to be, we need a new element, right? We need a new G for y-axis, I'm guessing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then y-axis, call y-axis. Did I get everything right? Axis left, y, select y-axis, call y-axis.
Looks right to me.
I'm going to add some semicolons. I don't know which side of the semicolon battle everybody falls in, but I am on the more semicolons. Somebody is suggesting, Paulo Kayak is suggesting maybe height becomes width. Do we have height? Well, I think we already have, I'm passing in this Y, which we already changed to use the height. So I'm hoping that just kind of works out.
Yeah, I mean,
since we had already copied those lines. So what do we got? Okay, we've got something here.
So I think we could, in a few seconds, move our axes a little bit to make it work. And I'd probably just do it in the SVG hand-coded area itself.
Okay, here?
Because we can essentially give it a transform attribute. And this is the same syntax as CSS transforms for folks that are familiar with that. So you would say like translate and give it
is that a function? Is it
yeah.
Okay. And then we give it an X and a Y. So for the X axis, we want to translate it to the bottom.
Right.
So the Y, so the X is going to be 0, but Y is going to be height?
Yeah. And well, let's see what that looks like.
Oh, it went away.
Because it pushes it all the way.
Too far.
We want to bring it back up by that margin that we had.
I think we were using like 30 or something, just hard coded.
Yeah.
Is that okay? It's not super pretty, but
okay.
It's overlapping. So now we're seeing the overlapping. Now it's good that I'm drawing this below. This is close enough. 20. 20 seems to work okay in the interest of time. Okay, and so then by the same token, for my y-axis, I probably don't care about the y part of it. I just care about doing this one. I'm going to guess it's width minus 20.
Well, we can keep it on the left side and just push it out by like 20. Is a common pattern. And I'll call out like the links to examples that we have in this notebook when we share it with folks, right? Like you can see the margin pattern, like there's a convention people use to like create these margins.
Gotcha. Okay. So now we've got some axes. Look at that. We have a scatter plot. We don't have a legend. I don't know if you have time to hang out and code a legend with us. If not, we can save that for another lunch.
I think, you know what I'd like to do is just go 5 more minutes to get some transitions going. Because I feel like the legend, you can draw a legend with like divs or square, it's like that. And there's examples all over Observable of nice little legend components. But I think the transition thing is like we can add like 2 or 3 lines of code and make this like, open up a whole bunch of more possibilities. So I think we could try that. And go, just a couple minutes longer. So the key word is just going to be the fact that you can add in a transition before you update the properties, and you'll see things animate. So
here?
So we can do it before all of our attributes and just see what happens. So if you just call transition as a function.
With no arguments, just
with no arguments, and we're basically not going to see anything change right now because everything is already set to those parameters.
Okay. Well, what if I restart this by refreshing the SVG? Well, then will we see something?
I think then we would,
Shift enter in the SVG cell, my SVG. Okay.
No.
We saw the original one, this hard-coded one here for like a second, and then the others just sort of showed up.
Right, because they don't have an initial value. So maybe one way to like design this a bit better is, what if let's only transition the radius.
Okay, how do we do that?
We can do that basically if we move the transition to the bottom, right? As the last thing that's chained, and then we set the radius to a new value, it'll do all the things that come before the transition instantaneously, and then it'll transition the other things, whatever else you do. And I would recommend that we set the original radius to like 1, like something really small.
Okay, so
And
we
then,
go from a radius of 1 to a radius of 15, like that?
yeah, let's try that.
Oh,
Now,
I just scrolled, so let's try. Ooh.
I think it's happening too fast for like, at least for the screen share to work. So one thing we can do is we can just change the duration of the transition to make it a little more dramatic.
Okay. How do I do that?
So you can chain after transition, you can dot duration and pass it some amount of milliseconds. Like, so if you put 3,000, that means that the transition will take 3 seconds to happen.
Okay. So now, whoa, they're like really slowly growing. Let me just do that again. Whoa. Cool. Oh, weird. Look. Oh, there's one. I can see which one was the original because it still has this outline. This stroke black, I'm guessing, is what that is. Let me try removing that. There we go. Cool. We did it. It's animated. Look at that. Woohoo.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool.
Yeah. And there's, I think we have, if we go 3 more minutes, I think we could try something where we switch the dimension and they move with the transition.
Oh, like which dimension we're looking at?
Mm-hmm.
You mean like which feature, like instead of bill length? Like we could swap that out for something? Okay, cool. Ooh, maybe we could have like a little drop down and you can choose which ones go on the axes?
Yeah, we could go there too.
All right, well let's just like maybe we could make a new cell with like X property or something.
Mm-hmm.
And right now it's bill length millimeter.
Yep.
Is this what you have in mind of where we're going?
Exactly what I'm thinking.
So now
I'm
gonna replace all of these with X property. Ooh, property. Just copy this. Try to do this real quick here. Where else do we got it? Where else? Bill length.
I think in the CX. Oh yeah, and also there, yeah.
Okay. And then let's make another one for Y property, shall we? This one's gonna error first, but that's okay.
The extent, yeah.
Bill, I don't see any other instances. Okay, let me add this one. Y property, everything's broken because it doesn't know what the Y property is. Bill, depth, millimeters. Okay, did this go back to working? Great, okay.
Yeah.
But so now if I were to change one of these, will it just like automatically work?
I think so.
Like if I change, it's gonna just be a line, I guess, if I do this, but whoa.
Yeah. So
whoa,
now we would, yeah.
I can switch them. Hello. Oh, I'm trying to edit the length. Wow, okay, cool.
So now we want to make our X and Y transition. And we can do that just by moving the CX and CY down.
Down below the transition duration?
That's right.
Okay, so this is where we're going to set the actual values. So transition applies to like, it's like do whatever comes after this with this transition.
Yes, it basically says if there's already, whatever the value currently is, transition, take this long to interpolate between those two values, and it just handles all the math and timing for you, which is super nice.
Great. Okay, so Hell on Earth suggests that we try, and I think it's a great idea, flipper length millimeters. Is that right? And now we get, whoa. Okay, they moved around, but they got really small again. Do we need to do that, like that really small radius thing?
We can probably just,
can we just like
not transition the radius.
Get rid of this now? Now that we have something else to transition.
I would move the radius above the transition because you want that sort of immediately set.
Oh, okay. So instead of changing that one, I should just get rid of this one. Okay. So now if I change this back to Bill depth. We get a, whoa, look at that. So we can see like the points kind of persist. Is it updating the axes, right?
Yeah,
Let me
yeah,
move
it's
this
updating
out
the
a little bit
axes as
more.
well.
It's a little cut off, so I'm just gonna move that. Whoa. Okay, interesting.
So yeah, basically we're transitioning from their initial position. So we could do some extra stuff to avoid that. I don't,
Oh yeah, look at the
we're kind
axis
of
go.
out of
Yeah,
time.
well, we're
But
over time, but I'm pretty pleased with what we got so far. We've got this animated chart. We maybe need a legend to know which species we're looking at, but you said there's I can look up the docs to figure out how to do that. We could make this a little fancier, maybe give some options here, maybe use an input widget so that people can choose between the different properties that we have. But I'm pretty excited about this. We can now we're plotting it with this join on our data set that allows us to change dynamically sort of what we want to display. And D3 is just managing all of the animation, all of the transitions, all of that for us. That's pretty cool. No?
yeah.
Right?
That's
Whoa,
awesome.
indeed, as Hero Proto says. Yes. Whoa, indeed. Agree.
Yeah.
Agree. So, yeah.
Real quick in the chat, so I dropped the D3Es docs. I just wanted to call out that you can do even more fancy stuff with the transitions and design the feel of them, which is maybe something for another time. And then before we go, I did a quick search. There is this D3 color legend notebook on Observable that essentially gives you a one-line legend.
Gotcha.
So we could basically, we could just do it real quick.
Try to do that right now. Let me grab this.
It'll take a few seconds.
Ooh. Copy that. Okay. And then we do, okay. So I just do this in a new cell. I'm going to do, let me put it back down here with my other imports. I'm going to do import swatches from D3 color legend. And now
you basically call it a function. I paste
within, do I have to do it in within my render function here?
No, I would do it in its own cell for now. I think there may be a way you can use it in the
swatches, and then I give it an object with color. Ooh. Color scale. Oh, but that's inside my.
Right.
So maybe I do need to do this in here.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
I think it's okay. I think it will. You might have to do another group to then.
It's giving me a can't access declaration swatches before initialization.
Oh, you named it the same thing. You said swatches.
Oh, cool. No, legend. Great, thanks. Multitasking is hard. So you said put in a new group.
Yeah, you want a group there.
Like that. Such a funny way they all migrate. Okay, and then I have to selection. I'm gonna try now that I know the basics. Do I do it like this? Select legend. And then is this like a call thing like I did before?
Yes, I believe so.
Let's see what happens. No, it did not like it. Did not like it.
I have done this in a different way. I'm just trying to look up real quick in one of my past notebooks. Oh no, okay. Instead of .call, you want to .append, and then let's see, you have legend equals that. Yeah, then pass in an anonymous function that returns legend.
That takes nothing, or?
Yeah, it doesn't have to take anything.
And returns legend. Like this?
Yes. And I believe that will...
Do we need to position it somewhere? Translate it?
that could very well be the case.
Should I? I don't know. I'm just going to put it at 100, 100, and so we can see if it's there. Oh, no. What's up?
There's something strange where...
In the neighborhood. Who you going to call? Sorry. Yeah?
I'm trying to inspect it in the DOM element. Oh, it creates a div, so we can't mix the SVG and the swatches directly.
Oh, can we put a div like
HTML.
Outside of it, or?
Actually, yeah. So if we wrapped everything in a div, and then, yeah, instead of having it be G, we put like after the SVG, we put the like. We
put another div, ID legend.
And this
okay, but then the selection was for the SVG, so it won't be able to find it within the SVG, right? So I have to do like D3 select.
Well, no, no, you can still do selection because we're still passing in the DOM element, like the overall div element. The thing that we'll want to do is when you pass in the SVG, right, in your function, you're now passing in a div, not an SVG. So we want our selection to be d3.select div.select SVG. Because we're basically saying like
that.
You want to put that one in quotes because we're saying like we want to like of the DOM element you gave us. Now we want to pick out the SVG element from that.
Like this?
Yeah. And oftentimes people will
so the
like,
chart is back, but now how do I get the? So now I have to do select div.
That's right. So now we do d3.select div.
Can I combine it?
Or sorry, .select legend. Yeah, basically because you don't want a selection.select
D3
because selection is already now the SVG. So we want to select the original div element that you passed in.
Okay.
And then select the legend after that. Does that make sense?
Gotcha. So I need to do this again. Okay. Like this?
Yes, exactly.
Oh, something changed. Well, it put something on there.
Yes, and...
I don't know what.
I'm not sure why the swatches isn't...
Let's see. I'm going to inspect this element. Okay, we got all our circles, yada, yada, yada. And then we have this div ID legend, and it has a bunch of stuff in it. What is the stuff?
I wonder if our...
Style, and then it has a div, but there's nothing inside of it.
I think part of the problem is that our SVG is taking up the whole cell size, and so the legend's getting pushed outside the view. So either we have to do some positioning.
So can I give this like can I give this div a width? I'll give it like the same width, but maybe a bigger height.
Yeah, I think that could work.
I could do like height plus, I don't know, 200, just to be sure. Did that work? Did not work.
It might have to be not attributes, but like style, width, and height.
Yeah, okay.
For the HTML.
Style. Right.
And then you have to add the PX, I think.
Height. PX. Oh, okay. But there was still nothing in the div for the
The legend didn't have something in it.
The legend, like there was nothing in it.
When I inspect it, I do see.
I see like the style, but there's no like content. Yeah, like this is just empty.
I think the last thing, okay, and this is because we relied on D3 to do something sort of magical for us, which was to automatically figure out what the colors should be associated with which species. So to fix this, we basically need to add the legend after we render all the circles. So if you just move the legend, those 3 legend lines to the bottom. So that's kind of a...
Move the 3 legend lines to the bottom. This part? Okay. No, we need the color scale.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because basically the color scale gets configured as it's used. So D3 notices, oh, like, this is the first time I saw this species, so I'm going to give it orange. This is the first time I saw this species.
Oh, my goodness. Okay, let me...
Go.
Amazing! We did it!
Nice.
Yay! Penguins! Right. Okay, it took us a little bit longer, but we made it eventually. Now we know how to draw these legend things with this little utility function here. So that's cool. And I guess I could position this around wherever I wanted. Like, could I even maybe move this first? Like, if I wanted it at the top here? Does that just work? Yeah, it just works. Look at that.
Just works.
Cool. We have a penguin chart. Yay. Thanks, Ian.
Yeah. Awesome.
So I don't know about you all, but yay. Yeah, I learned some basics of doing D3 today. Look at all this stuff we did. So we selected, we created an SVG element, just to recap. We created this SVG element, which then we used D3 select to grab it and then draw stuff on it. We drew each of these individual circles by joining the circle elements to our data, and we set whatever properties based on like the properties of those individual elements in the data, or those individual kind of points in the data. And then we also selected the axes groups, which we added to draw those axes, and then we used this little utility function to draw the legend. And we got this animated, transition-y, colorful penguin chart. Huzzah! Penguins for lunch here on Observable. Yay! So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. Thank you, Ian, a ton for coming on here and teaching me all this on your lunch hour. Where can folks find you, follow you, watch your stream?
Yeah, so I'm Anjana on Twitter and on Twitch as well, and I have been streaming D3 data viz stuff with a friend most weeks lately. So
awesome.
Yeah.
So that's Twitch TV /Anjana?
That's right.
Cool. Okay, so folks can find you there, and I think that's also your handle on most of the things, right?
Yeah, most social media, yeah.
So I'm just going to publish this notebook so that folks can refer back to it. Publish. Boom. Yes, I am sure. I want everyone to see my beautiful penguin chart. I'm going to drop this in the chat here. Oh, I put lunch the D3 kitchen, not lunch in the D3 kitchen. Whatever. Okay, now is it going to update? Publish. Is it going to update the slug for me? Maybe not. I don't know. We'll see. Does this work? Oh, goodness. All right, I'll drop the link. We'll drop it. We'll tweet it. Everyone will know about our beautiful penguin viz. I don't know. Let me know if that works, folks. If it doesn't, try adding an in that URL there. Visnu wants to know if there's a story behind the name Anjana.
Oh, there is. I'll tell it one day on my stream. How about that?
Sounds good. Topic for another stream. And looks like we've got Jesse Skinner coming in with a raid. Hello. All right. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. Please stay tuned. We're going to have more streams coming up for you soon. We've also got a meetup next week all about D3. So the Observable meetup will be on August 27th, I believe, is next Thursday. Follow us on Twitter to stay tuned for that. We're going to have some really cool talks from folks in the D3 community. And we also have the Learn D3 collection on Observable. So if you want to keep going with your D3 learning journey, as I'm sure we all do now, check out our Learn D3 collection. I'll drop a link in the chat in a minute. Thank you again, Ian. Thank you so much, everybody. Just huge, huge claps all around. And we look forward to seeing you next time.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye, y'all. Have a good one. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon, evening, morning, day, whatever it may be. Bye.
Bye.